Hello everyone, and welcome to the Trending in My Life podcast, episode 9. This week it's about the stress of moving to London and how to cope with it. It could be moving to any city, but it's that time of year when a lot of students all over the world are packing up and moving into halls of residence in their new uni. It might be a new city. It might be a new country. They might be going into halls of residence or shared accommodation. They might be with other students or staying with relatives. Whatever it is, there's a lot of stress involved. Some students will have the excitement of moving to a whole other country to study, so they'll have to deal with a culture adjustment in the new country as well. Not just the adjustment of being in uni. They'll miss home and miss family and friends. There's no doubt that'll be a factor. You'll feel a little bit sad, mixed in with the trepidation and worry of so many new things to adjust to. Don't let it overwhelm you. Take it one step at a time. You'll cope better that way. First of all, there's the packing. Try not to overpack. Just remember, at some point in your journey, an elevator will be broken and you'll have to carry your luggage up some stairs. Make sure you're able to do that. If you're moving to London, bring a good coat with a hood to keep you dry. An umbrella, or a brolly as we call them here, is not practical to put up in a very crowded street. Research is key to calming you down. It keeps your moving stress under control. The more you know, the more you feel confident that you can deal with things. Things like transport from the airport to your destination. That's a key one to solve. Don't rely on a line of taxi cabs waiting for you at the airport. It might not be there. A lot of other people have come off other flights. If you choose to use public transport, in London, the Piccadilly line, that's the blue line, and the Elizabeth line, the purple line, both go to Heathrow. But all of these trains don't go to all of the terminals, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terminals at Heathrow. The good thing is, though, the trains run between the terminals, so you can usually get to the right station you need to be in. There are lots of signs and people around that will help you find your way. The Elizabeth line is a newer line, and the trains are walk-through end to end with aircon and lots of spaces for cases. It's faster, but stops at fewer stations. The Piccadilly line is an older line with individual carriages and no aircon. People tend to put the windows down both ends of each carriage so that there's some air blowing through. But it stops at more stations, so it might be more convenient to where you're trying to get to. Do your research. Make sure you know how to get to the underground when you're in the airport. There will be signs, but you'll feel more confident if you know your way. The website for the underground trains is www.tfl.gov.uk. That stands for Transport for London. If you go on that website, you can click on the status tab, and that tells you simply how the tube lines are doing today. It'll tell you if the Piccadilly line has a good service, or if the District line has minor delays. They're all listed one underneath each other with the colours of the lines, and it'll tell you the status right next to it. So it's easy to see. You'll know if there are severe delays on the Elizabeth or the Piccadilly before you set off. When a delay is minor, it's okay to use that line. Just expect to stop for maybe 5 minutes at a station here or there. But if it says there are severe delays, don't get on the train unless you have to. You could wait 30 minutes at a station just sat on the train and then have the driver announce he's terminating at that next stop, and you all have to get off and wait for another train. Severe delays means try and find a different route. Try and get off and see if there's another route that you can go. Quite often at stations there are 2 or 3 train lines running through it, so you just follow the signs to a different line and you can make your way a bit further on another train. There's also a tab on the TfL website which is a journey planner. You can enter the name of the station you're at and the station you want to go to. It'll then show you how long it will take you to get there and the route options. So it will not only show tube trains, it will show buses as well. It might show national rail trains which run overground. And we've also got something called the DLR, that's the District Light Railway. Those are small trains but with loads of windows round, and they just run mainly around the Docklands area and to Canary Wharf where the financial district is. And there are some trams as well in South London where I am, so it'll show you all alternative transport routes that you can use. It's very helpful for planning a journey once you're here. One of the number 1 priorities I want to talk about is having street smarts. Your money should always be where you can feel it. Your front jeans pocket, your inside jacket pocket, in a bum bag or a fanny pack that's under your coat or t-shirt. If you're dressed in all designer clothes, you're a walking advert that your wallet is worth stealing. Like every capital city, we have pickpockets and thieves looking for an opportunity. Don't ever stop if someone asks you the time. This is a well-known question by thieves designed to stop you, to distract you, to look at your wrist or get out your phone, which they'll then snatch off your wrist or snatch your phone and run off with. Don't let that happen to you. They might have a partner that will come up behind and grab your bag. So be aware. If Londoners get stopped and asked directions, they quite often ignore the person and keep walking, and that's because it's the same reason. If you're stopped, you're giving the person in front of you an opportunity to take something from you. It'd be nice to think everybody is very honest in this world, but we tend to think the worst of people and think, no, I'm just going to keep walking because I need to protect myself. And they'll ask somebody else. But if it's a genuine tourist that wants to find their way somewhere, the much safer and sort of legitimate way of doing that would be to go into the nearest shop and ask an assistant who's in the shop, who likely lives in the location or around the location that you're at, and ask them for directions, because they're not going to hesitate to tell you, because they know you can't steal anything off them. They've not got their bag or their phone with them because they're in the middle of working a shop floor. If ever someone bumps into you, especially in a station, check for your wallet to ensure it hasn't gone. Some stations play an announcement about this, so they'll say pickpockets operate at this station, keep your personal belongings on you at all times. When you're in a crowded area, whether it's stations or walking along the street, wear your backpack in front of you. Walking around central London, there are so many opportunities for people to try and steal things from you. Don't give them that opportunity. It may not be sexy to wear that backpack on your front, but you can see your belongings. I quite often, when I'm doing that, rest my hands on it anyway. But you have to be sure that you can keep your belongings safe. After all, it's better to take these steps than have to replace your bank cards because they were stolen, because that's a long-winded hassle to try and do, and especially if your bank was in a different country. So after all those warnings, let's try and get you to relax. You've arrived, you've got to your destination, you found the uni, The staff are there and they're going to help orientate you. They'll take you on a walking tour of the area usually, and you'll have staff you can ask about anything you don't know, directions to places. They'll organise get-togethers so that you can get to know other new students. And then you'll get to the phase where you want to go out on the streets exploring. Your money is somewhere safely inside your coat and not accessible. You're all excited to explore. This phase is really good for you after all that stress you've put your body and mind through, getting there, getting to where you needed to be, meeting these new people and strangers. So get out there and absorb all those sights and sounds of London. One thing you may notice is that the streets aren't very wide here, and you're walking along narrow footpaths, which we call pavements, and the cars are going one way or just one lane in each direction. Stores, or shops as we call them, are right next to each other in a row, and there are no big parking lots attached to them, so everywhere may seem a bit cramped. Cafes put chairs and tables out on the pavement, often making the pavement seem narrower still. Oxford Street and Regent Street are the two biggest streets for shopping and much wider pavements. Oxford Street starts at Tottenham Court Road and runs all the way to Marble Arch. There's a Primark at both ends which sells discount clothing, shoes and accessories. This is the store you can afford to shop in. So if you're in need of anything to wear, you'll soon become familiar with this store. It's men's and women's. Just check which level you need. Last time I was there, Tottenham Court Road end had men's clothes in the basement, and the Marble Arch one, they were on the first floor. But the signs by the escalators will tell you. The queues to pay are long, very long in Primark, and their aircon isn't very good. But you are saving so much money on your purchases, you won't care. Or you will, but you'll put up with it. Having Primark either end of this very long shopping street, in between there are lots of very high priced designer stores, there are sort of mid-brand chain stores, and now there are also some tourist stores which have t-shirts and mugs and things in as well, all mingled in. Looping back to the levels or floors in buildings, when you walk in, you're on what we call the ground floor. Then upper level is the first floor. I mention this because I know in some parts of the world, when you walk in the store, that floor is called the first floor. But here, it's not the first floor till you've gone up one level. Taxes on your purchases. VAT, or value added tax, on anything you purchase is already included in the price tag on the item. There's no additional tax added at the checkout. That's true everywhere here, not just London, which may make you think, oh my God, things were so much cheaper at home. But remember, the tax is already in there. It's already included. It's good for when you get to the checkout because there's not anything additional added. You can add up on the price tickets as you go along how much you spent, and when you get to the checkout, that will be the total cost. London, after all, is a capital city, so it's not a cheap city to live in, but like everywhere, you can budget and find ways to economise. There's the Free Cycle website where people will offer things for free, and the only thing to remember is you will need to collect it and be able to get it back to where you're staying. But it's still useful if you needed to, say, replace a desk or get a small bookcase. Even people who drive a car don't often drive it in London. There's lots of workers that live in the suburbs of London that will commute on the tube and on the trains rather than drive their car in London. We have various charges for vehicles coming into the centre of London, which are sort of an environmental tax on them to limit the amount of pollution in the centre of London. And it's to discourage them from going through London and make them go all the way around the outside. there is a road that goes all the way around the outside, so that if they're crossing London with big lorries, they will use that. They won't come across the middle because there will be extra charges. When you're shopping, there are no free bags in stores. There used to be, but there aren't anymore, to carry your purchases home, except for Primark, who will give you a free brown paper bag with handles, which comes in small to huge coat size, which is great, but you have to remember that if it's raining, these will tear and rip. And if you overload and put heavy things in that brown paper bag, it will also rip. Stores do sell plastic bags, and you'll be asked at the checkout if you want one. They average about £1 each, but some may charge £1.50, so don't end up with a collection of them. At least reuse them if you have to buy them. The supermarket ones I think are about 75p. I haven't bought one in ages because I always carry like a fold-up canvas tote bag that I can open up and put shopping in, and you will see at checkouts lots of people bring their own bags. It's not unusual at all. It rains in London. No, really? Yeah, really. Let's discuss British sense of humour. It's based on dry wit or sarcasm. So if I said, I really want to stand here in the rain for an hour waiting to get into this restaurant, I don't mean it. What I'm saying, it's the last thing I want to do. But that gets lost in translation a lot, because if you took me literally, then you'd think that I wanted to stand there in the rain. But I mean it in a sarcastic way, which means that I don't want to stand there at all. So if what I'm saying seems to not fit with the situation, you should always query that. Like with what I said, I really want to stand here in the rain for an hour wanting to get into this restaurant. If you thought, does she really mean that? Then you could say, are you sure about that? Would you like to try somewhere else? Now if I say, yeah, I'm sure, but I roll my eyes or I sigh, I still don't mean it. So you should push again and say, okay, I think we should perhaps try somewhere else. It's raining a lot and maybe we should go somewhere else. And suddenly I'll go, well, thank goodness for that. Let's go then. But it's difficult. It's probably one of the hardest cultural differences to get used to, because we're saying something but don't mean it. But it's the sense of humour, it's the sarcasm, it's the dry wit. But if English isn't your first language, getting that sense of humour is very difficult. So just be aware of that. One thing I can't stand, and has only happened in recent years, is men spit on the pavement. It's disgusting, and ladies, don't date a man that does that. It speaks volumes. For at least half of my life, I never ever saw this happening, but it does now. The best way to deal with it is you just ignore it. Don't step in it, obviously, and keep walking. Talking of walking, when you cross a road, the signal is a red man to stop and a green man to go. Now, I'm not being sexist about that, because as a child, we had all this education in road safety, and it was the green man. You have to wait for the green man. So it's just a thing that has evolved over time. To be fair, in central London, around Trafalgar Square, they actually changed the traffic lights to be couples. So there'd be a man and a woman, a man and a man, a woman and a woman, as they light up red or green to let you cross the road. So you can look out for those. They're very different around Trafalgar Square. Back to what I was saying. So, green man means you can cross the road safely. Well, kind of. Because in central London, the cyclists don't always take notice of this. So where the traffic signal will be red to stop all the cars. Sometimes the cyclist will go straight through the red and straight towards the pedestrians crossing the road. So just be aware in the main streets of central London that you make sure you do glance in the way the traffic is heading towards you that has stopped, just to make sure they have all stopped and there isn't a cyclist whizzing through towards you. Because whilst you have the right of way, you really don't want to be bumped into by that cyclist. Mostly on the big streets, you would be crossing with a throng of people. So you wouldn't really have to worry about that, because no cyclist is going to keep cycling when there's like 50 people trying to cross the road. They will stop. A lot of London roads have look left or look right painted on the ground by your feet where you stand at the curb. This is just to remind you in which direction the traffic is coming. They've been there for years and years and years before we even got the signals with the red man and the green man. But it is very useful for international visitors because we don't all drive on the left. So it helps to remind them, and if they're behind a lot of people, they might see that on the ground as they step into the road rather than the sign up ahead of them. There's also what we call zebra crossings, which are black and white stripes across a road. And sometimes they have a pole with an orange ball light on top of the pole to mark them. Now, the law is, as a pedestrian, if you put your foot on that crossing to start crossing the road, then the traffic has to stop. You have the right of the way. However, lots of drivers in London are international drivers that did not learn to drive in London, and they did not sit and read the whole of the UK Highway Code, which they have to do if they're going to pass a driving test here. They've never heard of this, and they'll keep going and not stop. So if you step on one of these crossings, wait until the road is clear, that there's a gap between cars, and keep looking in the direction the traffic's heading towards you to make sure they have slowed down and are ready to stop. Lots of them know this, but the odd few don't. So just be careful. You can also cross a road anywhere you feel like it. You just look left and right, wait for a gap and cross. There are many small side streets with no crossings or zebras to use, or ones where it's a long additional walk to get to one. Use your brain and figure out the safest spot and use it. Looping back to shopping, you may be shocked that in the centre of London there is no big shopping mall. It does have two, and they're in the east and the west, and they're both called Westfield. And I know I've been in America and been to a Westfield shopping mall as well. So this is a chain of malls that's all over the world. There's 314 shops in the West London Westfield, and there's 300 shops in the East London Westfield. But the east one that's at Stratford is, and that's not Stratford, the Shakespeare Stratford, it's just an area of London called Stratford. That one isn't all undercover, so I prefer the one in West London, which is in Shepherd's Bush, because that's all undercover, and it's built in roughly a rectangle or with an arm coming off it to accommodate a big Primark, and you'll want to go in there. It has designer shops, but it also has more high street stores. It has things like the Boots chain of pharmacies there. So you could pop in there for a sandwich if you wanted to, or some headache tablets. Also, at one end of it, it's got a Waitrose supermarket, which means you could do some grocery shopping if you wanted. Waitrose tend to be a more expensive but higher quality of food supermarket, so there's just occasional things I would buy there, but if you're at the mall as a treat on a weekend, then you might want to pick up something. The Central Line tube goes from East London to West London. So you can catch that one in either direction to get to these shopping malls. So you'd want one that went to Stratford one way if you wanted to go to that one. But you can also get a bus from Oxford Street. The 94 bus goes from Oxford Street to Westfield, Shepherd's Bush. In the West London one, they have an ice rink at Christmas. It's on 2 levels, and it also has like an outside bit where some of the restaurants are. I used to live a 10-minute walk from there, and my routine from work would be to go home, get changed, and go to the mall to wander around for an hour before going home. It was a place to go and wander around the department stores because they were big enough to browse items without sales assistants bugging you. There are plenty of food options there if you want to sit and eat. There's a whole load of different ones upstairs, and there is a little bit outside as well. Even if you plan to travel to the mall just once a month to wander around, just window shopping, it will give you something to look forward to. And especially if it's cold or rainy, you can easily spend a couple of hours there. A treat like that's good to lift your mood, and it's nice to have something planned ahead that you can look forward to. It's definitely a place that's very photographable as well. There's always something in the middle section. It's where they put the ice rink, but they also have various little booths with different shows going on, maybe crafts, maybe gaming. Sometimes I've seen them have a gaming one there. When I lived in the area near the mall, I was a property guardian, and I lived in a disused music studio with 2 other property guardians in Shepherd's Bush. At the time, I only had a part-time job, which meant I couldn't afford London rents, even for 1 room. I found out that there are property guardian companies that you can register with who offer you places in various parts of London at half to a third of the price of a regular room rental in a house share. Sounds too good to be true, I know. Well, hear me out first. All the properties are empty at first, and the owner needs a presence, like people coming and going, lights on in the evening to stop thieves breaking in, and to steal light fittings or wiring. It may be empty, but there's always something a thief can find to steal. Even to break in and use it as a squat, which would make it difficult for the owner to sell on to somebody else. Usually they will be waiting to sell on to a buyer or a developer, and that's why they put the property with a property guardian company. They place a number of people, depending on the size of the building, in it, and then they only have to give those people 2 weeks' notice if the property gets sold and they need them to move out again. But you can imagine if, say if a property was empty and it got broken into and some people lit a fire in the middle of a room to roast some hot dogs, then the place burnt down when they left, and the owner is now faced with having a pile of rubble to try and sell, or a badly burnt building that the fire brigade put out the fire, rather than a structure of a basic building that is much more valuable to sell on. So here come the property guardians, looking for cheap accommodation, often whilst they save money to move into a regular house share. The property I was in was 20 minutes walk from work, so no commuting costs. There was a park with a pond and ducks nearby I could go for exercise, and then there was the mall that I went to in the evenings. Win-win. It was originally a recording studio and famous for Elton John recording Candle in the Wind there. This sounds very glamorous, but let me burst that bubble. I picked a room as mine, and you are allowed to put a padlock on it, so your belongings are secure inside when you go out. The carpet was old, green, with some stains and sort of rucked up bits in it. The walls were painted a neutral cream, and there was a window that looked out on some pipes, but no view as such. I bought a foldable camp bed and sleeping bag from Argos. That's a very useful place for things you can't find in high street shops, or you need something in a hurry. It's www.airb.com. argos.co.uk. You can buy online and pick up from a local store, and they collaborated not so long ago with Sainsbury's supermarkets so that you can collect from one of their stores too. When you're on the website, you can put in the postcode of your current address, and it has a facility to show if the stock is available or the next nearest store where that's available. They sell all kinds of things: furniture, bedding, stationery, laptops. I can't name it all because there's just about everything. It's very useful. I've used it in the past for things like a kettle or some steps. Things that you wouldn't think of being able to walk into a shop and buy without going out of the area you live in to find a specialist shop. So anyway, there I was, camp bed. One guy had a room next to me, he was another property guardian, and one guy in a room on the floor below me, he was another one. It was a big building though, and I only saw them a handful of times in the 3 years we lived there. I kept my clothes folded in a bag, washed them at the laundrette on the weekend, and back in the bag again. It was a while later when I bought a clothes rail and hangers from Argos. But I'm trying to stress to you how basic it all was. There was no heating, and the shower was a basic cube with a pull-across plastic curtain. There was a kitchen that, when the studio had been in use, would have been used for catering, but it was all old, broken and dirty, so we didn't use it. I had a kettle I bought from Argos again that I used in my room, so plenty of meals that only required hot water, like a cup of soup or noodles. And I could always go to the mall and buy a meal deal. I stayed there 3 years, and during that time, towards the end, there was a break-in and some thief stole some big lighting equipment from a studio room, and someone broke in and was squatting for a while in a different part of the building. The 3 property guardians that lived there, myself included, we didn't know anything about this. We only found out because the owner came to check on the lighting equipment because he was planning to sell it and it was missing. And then he reported it to the police, and they came and asked each of us if we'd heard anything or seen anything, and we hadn't, because part of being property guardians in that particular building was that we were supposed to keep in our section of the building and not stray into the music area of the building, which we didn't. When there was someone squatting in there that we didn't know about, that was because they were way at the other end of the building, which the building took up at least half a block. So you can imagine how big that is, and it was 3 stories. And we didn't know anything about this until the owner was doing a walk around in the music part of the building and found a sleeping bag and some stuff that showed somebody had been sleeping rough there. And what he did was he changed all the locks on the building. That's how we knew that the squatter couldn't get in. But it didn't make me feel as secure as I had previously. And at the time, it seemed that there were sort of a gang of men starting to hang out on the entrance steps, smoking in the evenings. And they never hassled me, but I had to walk past them to get into the building. And I was beginning to feel less safe. So I decided at that point I would move out. But, I mean, it helped me save the money up so that I was able to rent a regular room in a house share. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't been a property guardian. Because I went to see a few places before I decided to move into that one, and some of them are house shares. It's just an old, big, rambly house that's falling down a bit that they'll want property guardians in. Some of them are schools, and some of them are factories or offices that are sort of outside of the city centre. So there are a lot of various types of properties. And what happens is you go through a registration process at the property guardian company, and if you pass that, if you've got what they need to see with your ID and everything, then you have to buy a fire safety kit off them, which is a little fire extinguisher and a fire blanket to make sure you, if you do any cooking, that you're safe and not a risk to the premises. Then you get to move in. And although you could have to move out in 2 weeks if the property was sold, equally, you only have to give 2 weeks' notice if you don't want to live there anymore. And most places that you live in will require a month's notice. So that was an advantage when I decided I didn't want to live there anymore. I'm just telling you this story just because I want you to be able to see that there are options available to you when you've finished your uni and maybe decided to get a job in London and started off at a low level where you're in that catch-22 situation. You can't afford the price of things near your work, but at the same time you can't afford the cost of the commute to live outside of London when the prices are cheaper for the rentals, but the cost of your commute can also be thousands per year to go into London to get to work. So it just gives you some options. It just makes you aware that these things are out there. Anyway, if you want to know more about it, just Google Property Guardians London UK and the companies currently doing that will come up and you can have a look at it. I don't tell you this to recommend the experience, but I do tell you it to show that when you seem to be in a catch-22 situation and impossible, I can't afford the rent, I can't afford to move out of London and commute in, what am I supposed to do? I want to stay here, I want this job. And so there are ways, there are things that you can do to work around it. Also, when I've been in between places that I was renting, I've spent like week-long times in various hostels around London. I've been to ones in Rotherhithe, in Pimlico, Borough Market area, Hammersmith, Waterloo, and it's doable as temporary. Pricings vary it depends how many bunk beds are in each room, and sometimes there are all female, all male, sometimes they are mixed. It just depends. I mean, you can have a room with 4 bunk beds in, so 2 sets of bunk beds, but equally you can have one with 8 in. I think it depends where the hostel is located, how busy it is. When I was in the Rotherhithe one, there were 6 bunk beds in the room. I was the only one there when I checked in the evening, and there was 1 other person checked in overnight. So we were 2 people in a room for 6. So, you know, it's luck of the draw how that happens. But there are loads of hostels around London, obviously, for the tourists. And if you find yourself, you know, if you found somewhere you want to rent and you can't move in straight away, it's at least an option. And there are storage unit places around the suburbs of London where you can pay a monthly storage fee to put your belongings in a unit if you need to be sort of free of any belongings and just have a backpack with you. Sorry, digressed a bit there. Let's get back to you settling in London. There are a lot of free things to do. If you Google London free to do and then add this week, tomorrow, or the actual month that we're in, you'll soon see lots of websites. www.timeout.com is one of them. Time Out is a London magazine which they used to give away for free, but I haven't seen lately. It may be that they're only giving them out in the very centre of London. And talking of which, there are free newspapers. They're usually given out at the train stations between Monday and Friday. And it tends to be that you'll get someone standing outside handing them out in the commuting times, so they might stop doing it about 9:30 in the morning and then just leave what's left over in some racks outside the station where you can just help yourself. Monday to Friday, City AM and Metro are the morning newspapers, and in the evening it's the Evening Standard. The Evening Standard is very specific to London life, and you will often see them sort of at Oxford Circus at the entrance to the tube stations, handing those out. Outside Charing Cross Station, which is near Trafalgar Square, there are some racks by the bus stop, which is right outside the front gates of Charing Cross Station. And I've noticed they have the leftover morning papers in, like the City AM and the Metro, but they also have newspapers that are in foreign languages that are there. If they're in those, there's sort of open rack things, they are free for you to take. They are free newspapers. So you might want to pick up one of those. TAM is really more financial news. The Metro is more sort of chatty, what's on news. But I used to still pick up City AM because I liked the puzzle page and I'd have a go at the crossword. I'd never fill it all in, but I'd give it a go. And sometimes things like that are good for distracting you if you're worried about things, if you're starting to stress about there's so much to think about and I've got so much to learn in this new city. Sometimes a little daily routine of going and picking that paper up and doing that crossword or leaving it till the evening to do is just more relaxing. Talking of Trafalgar Square, because Charing Cross Station is by Trafalgar Square, let's talk about pigeons. I happily film pigeons because they're everywhere. And a long time ago, I've read that there used to be stalls in Trafalgar Square and they used to sell little bags of pigeon food. Perhaps it was Victorian times, I'm not sure. At one time, people were encouraged, visitors, locals, to feed the birds. But now, they don't want you to do that. And there are signs in Trafalgar Square saying, do not feed the pigeons. And that's because the pigeon population, particularly in Trafalgar Square, grew too big to be coped with. And that's when they brought in the hawks. And they still do this. I'm not sure what time of day and what days of the week they do it, because online it will tell you that it's 7 days a week and at 7 o'clock every morning, but it definitely isn't. I'm just not sure when the timings are. But if you're up very early, you might see this. A guy drives up in a white van. Sometimes it says pest control on the side, but most of the time it doesn't say anything on the side. And he gets a hawk out of the back doors, sticks it on his arm, feeds it something, takes off his little hood, and then lets it fly. And it flies around Trafalgar Square, and there's not a pigeon in sight. Now, you might think he's doing that to kill the pigeons, but he's not. The presence of a hawk that is a predator to any smaller bird will scare pigeons away. They will be like, I'm not going anywhere near that area. One of them must see the hawk and pass it on to all his mates, and they all know there's a hawk there. Get clear, get away, get as far away as you can. And there will be no pigeons in Trafalgar Square when they're flying the hawk. And it seems to be some kind of deterrent that they won't come back for hours and hours and hours, but then they do, which is why he comes and flies him again. But it's a sort of, I don't know how you'd put it, environmentally friendly. We don't like to think of it killing them, and it definitely doesn't. That's not, well, I think occasionally it does by accident, but that's not what they employed them to do. They're employed to scare the pigeons away. So, yeah, I mean, I know that pigeons carry a lot of diseases. I'm all for filming them, and I think they can do some quirky little things when you're watching them, and it's great for filming. But definitely I wouldn't try and feed one so that it took something out of your hands, because I wouldn't want to be that close to one. You've got to be aware of that they carry a lot of diseases. You're not going to contract them by being near a pigeon. You're going to have to be touching that pigeon. So you don't have to worry about getting something off them. And even if they say if you get pigeon droppings on your clothing, which you may do because there's a lot of them about, it's supposed to actually be good luck. That's the what they say. It's a saying. It's good luck if a pigeon poops on you. But, put a plastic glove on your hand if you're going to wipe it off with a wet wipe. So that you're not actually touching that poo. Oh, I have to tell you this story. I have got it on film, but as you probably know if you've listened to any of my other podcasts, I do go to work very early in the morning. So I'm travelling between 5:30, 6:30, 7 maybe. And this was around 6 o'clock probably that this happened. I was on a train which was underground, which is why it was unusual. It was underground and the doors open and a pigeon walks onto the train from the platform. So it's now, and the door's shut, and it's now on an enclosed train. So everybody is watching the pigeon to see what it's going to do. Pigeon is completely calm. We stop at the next station, doors open, pigeon walks off the train and onto the platform. Doors close and off we go. And I actually got it on film. So in a future video I will put that on so you can see it. But I thought, it's not the first time I've seen it happen, but it's usually been that I've got on a train, the pigeon's already there, and so I've not actually seen it get on, go a stop and get off again. But it was completely calm about it, and whenever I have seen it happen, which is probably about 3 times I think since I've been in London, whenever I have seen it happen, the pigeon is never flying, it's never panicking, it's just calmly walking around. So if it happens when you're on a train, I think the thing is to be as chilled out as that pigeon is, because it's going to deal with it all by itself. You don't have to shoo it off the train, you don't have to do anything. The pigeon can figure it out all by itself. So let's get back where we were. You're settled into your accommodation, you've got in a routine with your classes, but you want a weekend stress-free, and we're talking about those free things to do. Most of London's museums are free. They have a box or some container near the exit which says donations on it, so you voluntarily can drop some coins on your way out. A lot of them now require you to book on a time slot online, and they've done this over the years because it avoids overcrowding. And that's the idea, but it's still free. Now, unfortunately, having booked that time slot, you're still in a queue or a line of 100 people with the same time slot waiting to go in. Just be prepared for that. Don't let it happen and put you off or upset you. As long as you know, manage your expectations. Yeah, that's what's going to happen when I get there, but it's worth the wait. I want to see what's inside. So you wait your turn and you go in. There is usually a bag check in a lot of these places. The best thing to do is go with no bag at all, because then you can avoid the bag check. But if you are out for the day and have a bag with you, then they will have a security guard that will just search your pockets and of the bag and then let you pass if you're all okay. Sometimes they will, if it's a big bag, sometimes they will ask you to go and check it in a locker, because there'll be lockers. Be prepared for those costing perhaps £1, and that's refundable. Like you put £1 in and you get a little key, and then when you put the key back in again, the £1 will come out for you to take with you. Just be prepared to have a £1 coin with you for something like that. I say that because I never carry cash with me, and I think we've got to a point, we're kind of a tap your card society in the UK, that we don't carry cash with you. Sometimes they will ask you to wear your backpack on your front. Now, I've told you that that's the best way to wear it anyway in crowded places, but for some reason they think you might knock over statues if it's on your back. Can't see it myself, but I've never had a problem with that if that's what they ask you to do. Yeah, it's odd. Anyway, the British Museum is right in the centre of London, near Russell Square, and it's got a bit of everything in it. Things from all over the world. it's also got a really good gift shop if you're looking for an unusual item for a friend for like a birthday. So that's something just to stick in your memory in case you ever need it. The Natural History Museum is in South Kensington, so you can get a tube or a bus to get there. If you're going that way, you'd be going towards Harrods, and that's also somewhere where you can go in and just have a wander around floor to floor, see the most amazing, ridiculously expensive items, but it's an experience. I would recommend riding the Egyptian escalator, because you have to follow the signs or ask the assistants to get there. Because it's a very spectacular escalator when you go up. If you've never been in Harrods, you don't quite understand what I mean by that, but as you ride the escalators up and down, there are like little alcove balconies with various pieces of art in. Or on one, I think I went and they had a singer just singing on one of those balconies to the people going upstairs. Yeah, Harrods is an experience all in itself. Just don't expect to buy anything. Go for the enjoyment of seeing it. Take a few photos, maybe video, but don't expect to buy things because it's an expensive store. Right, back to the museums. In South Kensington, you have the Natural History Museum, which is the one with the dinosaurs. And it is always busy because of the fact that you've got a lot of children that want to go there. So be aware of that you will stand in that queue and make sure you book your time slot. It's just round the corner from the Science Museum, so you could do more than one museum at a time if you wanted to. But again, you've got time slots. I am not that keen on the Science Museum, and I'll tell you why. The last time I went there, as soon as I walked in, I was walking down this slope and to get to the inside the museum, and there were lots of people stood around stopping the people walking in, trying to get them to sign up to donate to the museum, which is they want your bank details and they want a monthly payment. And I'm thinking, this museum is free to go in and I haven't actually seen anything yet, and you want me to give you money. So I did point that out to them, and I said, if you ask me when I come out, then you're more likely to get a response. They still wouldn't get a response because I couldn't afford to do it. But the museum is free, so you have to be a bit sort of determined not to be put off by these people, I think, and just say, no, I can't do that now, and go past them. So you've got the Natural History Museum, you've got the Science Museum around the corner from it, but if you go in a straight line, you've got the V&A Museum. This one is the Victoria and Albert Museum, named after Queen Victoria and her husband. And this one is famous for clothing. It has a lot of clothing exhibits in. So they'll have dresses worn through different periods of time in a historic way, but they'll also have collections of clothing from famous people. It's free to go in. In fact, all these museums are free to go in, but they hold exhibits, which will be a special room that if you want to go into, you have to have paid for a special ticket for that. And the V&A does that a lot. They hold big exhibits, but you have to pay to go into them and not just go in the main part of the museum, because the main part of the museum is always free. In central London, very close to St Pancras Station, there is the Wellcome Collection, which is really quite a big museum, but it's basically one man's collection of all kinds of stuff. So some of it's sort of weird. There seems to have been a time in our history when rich people would go travelling all around the world and buy things in all the different places they went and bring them back. Then over the years, they would pass away and they would put in their will that they wanted these things to be made into a collection available to the public. And that's how these museums come into be. Whilst I'm not very keen on the Wellcome collection, and only because I think some of the stuff is weird, there are quite a few of these small museums that are collections by like a couple or family members, and the Wallace collection is one of those, which is at the back of Oxford Street in Wilberforce Street, so it's quite close to the back of Oxford Street. And this collection I really like. The rooms in this huge house are painted different colours, so you have the blue room, the purple room, the pink room, which I find quite fun. And you walk in the room and it has paintings around the room for you to look at. It's like art displays, but they're all on a purple background, or they've got the background of the wall, which makes the feeling and the vibe of each room different. And it's not just art, because there's also a collection of antique clocks. There is also a collection of suits of armour. It's a very diverse collection of things, which is what you get when, people they're not collecting thinking this will be in a museum one day. They're collecting for the fun of it. They're seeing things and saying, oh, I really like that, I'll buy that. And then they take it home and they, stick it in the attic, and eventually it all goes to a museum in their will, because like years and years later they suddenly think, well, what's going to happen to all this stuff? My relatives don't want it. There's a couple of museums near Lincoln's Inn Fields, either side of it. Again, that's right in the centre of London. They're very small museums. One of them is all medical equipment, but you have to remember that we get a lot of doctors studying in London, and so it would be relevant to them, and they probably quite enjoy it. And that's not even starting on the art galleries, which of course are many in London, and these are free to go in. Again, they have special exhibits where you can pay and go and see something, which will be like a travelling exhibit. It'll go to one museum for a month, and then it'll go to another museum in Scotland for a month, and that's why they don't keep them for a long time. I'm the kind of person that I like what I like, so I can walk around and see lots of pictures and only one will sort of speak to me. Or like sculpture-y pieces of art. There's a gallery in, I'm trying to think what area of London it's in. It's called the Saatchi Gallery, and that's a very different kind of place to go in, because it's along the lines of an art gallery type museum, but inside they very much use the space. They have quite large sculptural type exhibits, and you'll walk into a completely white big room and have a small thing in the middle of it, but it gives you the chance to stand away from it and to walk all the way around it. The one thing I would say, if you go there, they don't like you to have backpacks. So if you go there, try and go in just your coat with things in your pockets, so that you don't have that hassle to get in. So back now, finally, to the subject of rain and London. Please pack a decent raincoat with a hood that will keep you dry in a heavy shower. And don't underestimate it that it does get cold in London in the wintertime. Whilst an umbrella, or what we call a brolly, will keep you dry, it's not always practical to use in a crowded street. I always think walking down Oxford Street is a bit like being a car on a racetrack. You keep looking for a space to pull out and zip around the person ahead, then tuck back into the space ahead, and you're waiting and watching for the next clear space ahead. No way can you do that with a brolly in your hand. If I do carry a brolly, I also carry a sealable plastic bag to put it in when it's wet, so I can carry it when I'm inside where I'm going. Always buy a foldable one, because you don't want the hassle of having to carry a brolly. On transport, buses and trains, there's this thing where people forget their umbrella, leave it behind, and then the next person in that street who finds it at a bus stop or on that bus and they sit down and there's one on the seat, will pick it up. And it's kind of what the world makes the world go round. If you leave it and that brolly ends up in the bus garage at night and the cleaners come on the bus and clean the bus and find it, it will go to lost property. Now, I've been through the process of trying to get a brolly back from lost property. What you have to do is you have to email them and they will let you know if they find it. And then you have to go to Marylebone Station and then you have to identify it and you have to pay a fee to get it back. And that fee is often more than the cost of the brolly in the first place. So you see, if you take that brolly that you find on a seat or at a bus stop, you're actually helping the person out that lost it, because they don't want to have to go through that process again. And it's like recycling, it goes on to the next person, and at one day you'll accidentally leave it on a bus or on a train, someone else will pick it up, and so it goes on and on and on. Anyway, throughout all the stresses of your move to London, try to distract yourself with some of these things that I've mentioned. I hope this podcast helped you out in some way. Please leave a comment below, and here's hoping you're living stress-free, or at least getting there. Please like, comment and subscribe, share with a friend, and I'll be back next time. Bye for now.